Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Diehards. I'll be recording Cedric Tennyson's bio, Our Bookish Wizard. Part 1. "It's a boy!" stated the midwife excitedly as she lifted the crying babe. Wrapping him in clean linen, she carefully washed his face before handing him to Lady Olivia. Gently cooing to the babe, Olivia placed him against her bare chest and hummed pleasantly as her fiery red hair settled over the child, who immediately began to quiet. "He's quite perfect," she whispered. Then more loudly, "Please get Lord Tennyson." "Yes, ma'am," bowed the woman, before hastily grabbing a large basket of soiled linens, and reverently as possible tried to open the door with an elbow. Upon failing to get any leverage on it, she turned beet red and set the basket down. Glancing over, she felt a wash of relief, as the Lady Olivia appeared not to have noticed, but then started again at the infant's strong gaze. The midwife quickly opened the door and, using her hindquarters to keep it open, recovered the basket. Attempting yet another bow on her way out of the room, her foot caught on the threshold, and she unceremoniously collapsed in a heap outside the room, flinging basket and linens alike in an unsuccessful attempt to regain her balance. "My heavens, are you quite all right?" Olivia heard her husband say from the other room, alongside the creaking of an old chair. "Yes, Lord Tennyson," answered the mortified woman. Olivia heard the shuffling feet of Lord Tennyson assisting the woman to her feet. "Just lost my footing is all. Your wife and son are ready." "Son, you say? Spiffing!" Lord Tennyson's head ducked as he entered the room, his broad frame barely fitting through the small doorway. "Olivia, my dear, you've done it! Extraordinary work, darling. I just knew—" His voice trailed off as he stared at his beautiful wife and babe staring intently at him. "I say, that's quite the penetrating gaze he's sporting me," he laughed while slowly walking up to the bedside. "Isn't he gloriously perfect, love?" exclaimed his wife, tenderly caressing the child's back with her hand and laying her cheek across his head. "Well, he is that, dear. It's just—" He trailed off, having what was beginning to feel like a stare-off with the newborn. "Well, aren't they supposed to have trouble focusing?" He finished, slowly moving to the side as the child's eyes followed, and brow furrowed in what most certainly looked to be a glare. "Anthony," his wife, lifting her head, stated none too gently, "if you do not come touch your son and reassure him he is the most beautiful, perfect, intelligent, and magnificent being you ever laid eyes on this instant, I'll not let you touch me for a year." "Why, dear, surely you can't." Upon losing the staring contest with the infant to look up at his wife's eyes, he cleared his throat. "My boy, you're the most beautiful, perfect, intelligent, and magnificent being I've ever laid eyes on," he practically shouted, stepping forward to enthusiastically scoop up the babe. After several minutes, the child's unnatural gaze finally moved from his father's in search of his mother's. To Lord Tennyson's further surprise, the child's pupils, a silvery metallic color that had so transfixed him, immediately looked to dim brown, reflecting the wooden colors of the walls. It made for no question as to if the child was gazing at you, and set his father not a little too on edge. Part 2. I found it, Olivia dear!" yelled Lord Tennyson, not looking up from the manuscripts he had lying across 4 other books, precariously balanced atop his study table. Lady Olivia came to the room carrying the toddler astride her left hip and muttering, "Anthony, whatever are you on about? I was just about to put Cedric down, and you've plumb undone all my efforts." He began nodding and patting his hand offhandedly while never raising his eyes. "Yes, dear, quite sorry. But I found it. The missing link to our beautiful, perfect, intelligent, and magnificent boy's somewhat unusual characteristics." He had taken to regularly adding the description as though they were titles bestowed on his son by the doting mother. Finally, glancing up from the manuscripts, Lord Tennyson could see that she was on the fence between being annoyed and curious at the discovery. It had taken a year of gently broaching the subject with untold numbers of subtle reassurances that he knew the child was his, before she wasn't immediately defensive of the implications. After a suitable amount of time seizing his expression, she appeared to relax, and a subtle gleam of curiosity he so loved in her eyes appeared. "Okay, let's hear it. What did you find?" "So I was thinking to myself, surely such unique features would have been recorded in one of our ancestors. So even if it was a hidden attribute, it should have manifested at one time or another." "You said you'd already checked through both our lines as far back as we had record," she interjected. Yes, roughly 25 generations on my side, and 2/3 that of yours, to no avail. As you know, much of our records pre-undead plague were lost. But I was looking through an older manuscript by the minstrel Mungo Sandyman. Oh, Anthony, surely you jest. Mungo's narratives were blatantly biased, self-promoting, and, frankly, held the reliability of a 6-year-old boy given to flights of fancy. Lady Olivia interceded once more. Yes, dear, but if you let me finish. Sorry, go on, she said. Well, this particular ballad narrates a child of Helsey's having reflective eyes of the sun, penetrating one undone, metallic sheen reflecting all in sight, yet to one they held a piercing light. And before you object that it is all metaphoric, I have another here. He quickly crossed the room and began sifting through pages. How did you find this record of Helsey? Your parents almost withheld their blessing, so lacking in documentation is she, Olivia said with a hint of bitterness. Quite so. I hadn't realized whom it was referring to. 'Twas the wording that caught my attention. Ah, he exclaimed, pulling some fragile-looking pages free. A document many attribute to Inquisitor Diehards. He was actually referencing a conspiracy to kill one of his wards, but he offhandedly referred to his charge's eyes. I'm no novice at getting information, one way or another, though I prefer a more gentle hand. If I had half the intensity of stare my ward has, I would never have to resort to the less pleasant means of information extraction. A reflection of metal, it seizes the breath and tightens the heart. Her curious and persistent nature would make for a fine inquisitor one day, if she so choose. He continues on with details of the plot after that, concluded Anthony, gazing over at his wife. Lord Tennyson noticed she was smiling warmly into her son's eyes. You hear that, little one? She breathed. You have the heritage of Helsey's first, and you'll unearth all manner of mystery, just like your brilliant father, she said softly while walking from the room, apparently considering the matter settled. Anthony sat brimming with pride. By God, he loved that woman, and such an offhanded statement filled him with yet deeper adoration. He was glad to have solved part of the mystery of his son's strange features, and yet he found himself feeling irked. Helsey had been a particularly private person. Despite having been pivotal in ending the undead plague, details of her life were bizarrely rare. It was only through generations of tradition, and the most slim of evidence, Olivia's family was able to claim her noble heritage. Yet all the research only served to make him more curious. He sat questioning the ceiling. How had evidence of her life become so sparse? Or even more likely, why? Part 3. A gentleman does not... Cedric's statement ended abruptly as the man's fist found its way through his nose to become acquainted with the area previously reserved by the back of his head. Do that, he finished lamely, lying upon his back. Reaching up, he pinched the bridge of his nose to staunch the bleeding, and assessed the situation somewhat coldly. Perhaps coming here had been a mistake, he conjectured matter-of-factly. Not gentlemanly, he says. Why, you cut me to the deep, you do. And hear me prize myself on being nothing but prim and proper. The surly seaman laughed, while clapping two of his friends on the shoulders. And now's I have to ask Bridgie if she thinks me ungentlemanly. What says ye, Bridgie? Ain't I's a perfect gentleman? He asked, using his friend's shoulder to help stabilize himself from a clearly inebriated state. You's a proper ass, Knuckles, is what you is, the barmaid retorted, bending down to help Cedric to his feet. Why, Bridgie, you's... He started again. Shut up and have a seat. I got a bar to be serving, and I ain't got time for your witty banter. She cut him off with a yell. 'Twere your lover boy who started it. I was only going for a pinch, and he started again. I says have a seat or move on. She cut him off again. Knuckles raised his hands and turned to reseat himself. All right, she says, turning to Cedric. Let's have a look, eh? Slowly pushing his hand away, she lifted her head, this way and that, approximating the damage. Sorry, sir. There's nothing for it, she stated calmly before roughly grabbing his nose and giving it a solid jerk to the side. Bloody hell! Cedric barely kept from yelling. Oh, that's better, she finished, beaming at her handiwork. I'll be right as rain in a day or two, she continued. Have a seat and I'll grab you one on the house for defending me honor, she finished with a sly smile and a wink. Master Cedric Tennyson had a seat in one of the filthiest taverns he had ever heard of, much less seen. Had he not been very confident of the information, he would have left as soon as he smelled the place. But records on this side of the world were rarely written in books or manuscripts. They were passed on in stories and tales. Though a gentleman by birth and a scholar by education, Cedric prided himself on his ability to sift through tales for facts and wisdom above all else. Though he had tried his hand at storytelling, he didn't have the charisma for it. He got the information right, but it always came out sounding more like a history lesson than a tale of epic adventure. He didn't mind the epic, fanciful additions, and even understood their necessity to entertain the class of simple-minded folk. But the meat and potatoes of the dish, for him, was the truth behind the tale. And he had gotten quite proficient at sifting fact from fiction. It was the sifting that found him here, looking for an heirloom lost for generations, an heirloom that by right of birth he had as strong a claim as any. A short time later, the barmaid weaved her way once more through the throng, and after a couple stops, deposited a cup of brownish liquid, and a bowl of something that looked like it had been taken from a pig's trough. "Here you go, lovely," she said with a not unpleasant smile. "It's got me own secret spice. Give her a taste and tell me what you think." "Spiffing." Oh Lord, thought Cedric, I'm going to die. Racking his brain for a suitable excuse for not eating the pig slop, a loud clatter of something hitting the floor occurred behind her, and she turned. Cedric quickly gestured over the food and mumbled a quick incantation, instantly changing its flavor. Whatever had caused the fortuitous noise resolved itself, and Bridgie turned to see he had finished off most of the bowl. "Oh shit!" she exclaimed in horrified surprise. "You wasn't supposed to eat the whole thing! I thought he could get down a full bite! And I'd gone and killed me night!" she muttered in distress. "My heavens, but that's potent," said Cedric as he tried with increasing fervor to keep his seat trapped beneath him. "You had him eat the whole thing, Bridgie?" exclaimed Knuckles, walking over to the now unconscious form of the young Lord Tennyson. "Oh, he's looked but the other way in an instant, and next I know he's eating the whole thing, as though it didn't taste like shit," she returned in wonderment. Then Knuckles started laughing hysterically, as if come over with some cosmic joke. Over a minute passed, with him only able to get a short breath before the air was forced from his lungs in yet another fit. Finally, holding his sides, Knuckles just managed to make himself be understood. "We're just gonna sell him as a cook," he whispered between bouts. When it felt as though his sides might well and truly rip open, he was able to control himself once again. Wiping away the last of the tears and letting out a deep sigh, he gestured to his goons and mumbled contentedly to himself. "Now, where's that monkey of his run off to?"